Good morning.
Hi, Arwen.
And I'm going to mispronounce your name, I think. Is it Benebell?
Perfect. How did you mispronounce that?
Wonderful. Everybody, please say welcome to Benebell Wen. She is the author of the Holistic Tarot, and she's got other projects coming up that we're going to talk about. I had the pleasure of reading her book before it was published, and it's amazing. It's chewy, it's deep, it's tarot altering. But welcome. How are you doing this morning?
I'm really good. How are you?
Fabulous, fabulous. Just got home from water aerobics, so the hair's a little damp.
Good though. You look very good. You look radiant.
Well, after her mom was in the class with us, and I think she was trying to prove a point because we're all like, at the end of it.
Uh-huh.
Like, don't beat your mom up, please.
Oh.
But tell us a little bit about you, like, what brought you to tarot?
Um, I think ever since I was as far back as I can remember, I've always been sort of interested in the occult without knowing it was the occult. And so, I went to the public library. I just, made a beeline for the occult section. I was always interested in world religions. Everything fascinated me in that regard, in terms of the unseen element of our world. And so, as soon as I learned about cartomancy and tarot, I just took like fish to water. I think that's sort of the story of everybody who's into this. I mean, it's a very familiar story. It's nothing interesting or unique. It's our story. It's all shared. But that's really what happened to me. And then once I got into it, I just couldn't get out of it. And then in college, I started a more sort of academic study of it. I was more interested in how people before me did it, and not just, oh, let me just read this intuitively. I was a lot more interested in, the history and the legacy of tarot.
Very cool. So, Atlantis? I'm kidding.
Maybe.
You know, they can't prove it had and didn't happen, but I'm stuck with the Venetians. So, and actually, from what I've studied, playing cards actually originated, if I'm correct, in China and that area.
Yeah, China. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then I guess the traveling people, they call them the Romanies, but they were really the Egyptians originally, is my understanding, and they're the ones that migrated around and infected us all with the evil of the cards.
I think it followed the Silk Road. It really followed commercial trade, and it was such a form of had entertainment value. So it was very
Yeah.
easily picked up by any society or any culture that came upon it. And the same way how tarot today, every artist who comes across tarot just wants to input and add their own understanding of tarot to the idea, the structure. So I think it was the same way. They get the structure and go, well, I can add to it with my own cultural understandings. And so as it progresses westward, you eventually at some point, at least the theory is, we get the tarot.
Yeah, yeah, and however we got it, my 400 decks and I are super happy we did.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit about. I'm always curious when I talk to people about who or what is your creative muse. Do you have one? I mean, do you? What do you think of that?
Um, what's interesting is I've learned to pay attention to signs and symbols. So just by way of an example, if a raven lands somewhere and we make contact for a little bit longer than 3 seconds, I don't just overlook it. It's something important to me. And I think that, and from a more scientific or rational perspective, that triggers me to start thinking, right? I start an analytical process in my own mind. And eventually, because I'm going down a path of thinking, of thought, I reach, in a form of inspiration that then turns into manifestation.
That's a
But,
very good way of looking at it. I never thought about that, but yeah, because I'm the same way. I see birds all the time, but
right.
they have to, they have to be some kind of interaction, and they have to do something. I had a friend who called me once, and she said, I don't know what's going on. I've got these ravens and crows, or one's pecking at my window. And she said, and then one flew over me and dropped a dead snake on my car. I said,
I would
girl,
take that as a sign.
we need to pay attention. And she was being tapped on the shoulder by a deity. But I said, this dead snake is like, the next step is going to be a lot more in your face. So, but yeah, but signs are important.
As for the snake, I find it so fascinating how the East and West have very sort of diametrically different opinions on what the snake represents. So I've always had the idea that it represents psychic ability, power, wisdom, positive things. But it can also be the abuse of power. It can definitely go in the very dark direction very quickly, but there is a really strong positive element to it. And then in the West, we just don't have that. It's very absent. It's treachery. It's a
Yeah.
traitor is in the mist. So I'm like, oh,
And I'm a snake lover. I have
okay.
had a pet snake before, and I see them as transformation because, a snake can shed its skin
Yeah,
and become new.
right.
And I'm a dragonfly person, and dragonflies in the Appalachians they were called snake doctors because they said if you killed a dragonfly, its snake would come after you.
Oh, interesting.
So the dragonflies were considered lucky, but you didn't hurt them because they had a connection with snakes on some level. I've never really gone into it deeper than that, but it's just an old Appalachian tale I heard somewhere. I was like, huh,
That's cool.
yeah. So, but I'm with you. Snakes. But I was raised by a mother who got mad if you killed a king snake in her yard because king snakes, of course, eat other snakes.
Uh-huh.
And where we lived, we had a lot of poisonous snakes.
Uh-huh.
So you wanted the kings in your yard.
Right.
But tell us about your most recent project. Tell us about the last one, and then we're going to go to the exciting new one.
The last project as in holistic tarot, right? Oh, okay. Well, it was a book on tarot. It was a big book on tarot. But see, the thing is, everyone always makes it sound like I did all this great work, but it was really research. All I did was compile great work. So it's a collection of great work is all I did. You know what I mean? So I'm like, well, thanks. I love to take the credit, but if you look at the citations, you can see very quickly it's not really my work. But that's basically what I did. I was fascinated by the various perspectives, and I wanted to put that together. And that was basically the project. And it was also, I think I wanted to write a book that would sort of introduce tarot to people who might have been rational skeptics who didn't really want to see tarot as something magical. And I think people might have mistaken my approach as me saying that tarot isn't magical. I definitely didn't say that.
No.
I was just saying there's different ways to express tarot, and you need to use vocabulary to speak to your audience. And if I start using particular, esoteric terminology right from the get-go, you're going to turn off a lot of people who have a lot to gain from tarot. There's a lot of wisdom here that I feel like, there's different ways of using tarot. You can use it for a very sort of, divinatory manner, but you can also use it for just, inspiration for creative writing.
Yeah.
So
And that's one of my big things.
I know that's your thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Benebell and I are going to be, I'm looking around like there's an audience here. Wow. Whoa. We're going to be at the Portland, it's the Northwest Tarot Symposium. If you're near Portland or can get there in March, go. Mary Kay Greer, myself, Benebell Wen, oh gosh, I'm losing names.
Jamie Elford.
Jamie Elford, yeah. But it's going to be off the hook, y'all. It's going to be a lot of fun. And it's all levels. You don't have to be 30, 40 years into tarot. You can be one day into it. You can be, oh, yeah, that card deck looks kind of fun. Let me pick it up. It's for all levels. So, I mean, there's going to be an interpretive dance class. So, there's...
I didn't know that.
If I didn't misread on Sunday, can't think of her name, but there's going to be a class on movement and dance with the tarot, which I'm really excited about. Now, do you have a certain ritual before you begin your work? Is there anything, like for me, I have to make sure if I'm in the kitchen cooking, my kitchen has to be spotless before I start and spotless after. I can't even have a glass on the counter.
When I'm doing a tarot reading, yeah, I know a lot of people have different approaches. I'm not one who can read in my car. I don't sort of read tarot willy-nilly. For me, it's something that's really close to my personal spiritual practice. And so I treat it with that same level of respect and that same level of veneration. And so, yeah, the space has to be clear physically and metaphysically. I do like to put myself in a particular zone. If I feel that I'm frazzled or upset or I'm dealing with my own personal issues, I won't read for other people.
Me too. I can't. Because
Right.
I bring all that stuff in. You
Yeah.
know, and I'm working on learning how to separate that, but I find that if I separate myself from my emotional self,
Hmm.
I'm an intuitive reader. That's how I read. I read, and I tell people what I read with symbols. Symbols to me don't mean the same thing to symbols to somebody else.
Right.
I love dogs. I've got a dear friend who was bit by a dog as a child. She's afraid of them. So dog does not represent loyal friendship to her. It represents run, get in the car.
And I think that's really important because if she was a tarot reader or she was a reader and then she saw a dog, how she's going to interpret that will be vastly different from the way you would interpret it if it came up in a reading that you did for yourself.
Exactly. She said she can't read Lenormand because of that.
Funny.
Now, you just spoke about your heritage, and I have a question of that. How has your own heritage influenced your path or spiritual direction?
Um,
If you can talk about it. You don't, I mean, I know some
oh
people
no,
are very
I don't
private.
mind.
Okay.
I don't mind. You can ask me anything. I really don't mind.
Yay!
It's really, I guess it's hard to say because I know that I'm still discovering it for myself. So anything I say in terms of absolutes will probably come back and kick me in the butt because I could change in a couple of years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to say anything with absolutes. I know that when I was younger, I did dismiss it because a lot of it can, I mean, for example, just if you want to talk about tarot, there is no real ethical standard in the ways that they practice, like shamanism, mediumship. It's just all over the place, and you have to get ready for anything. There isn't this sense of ethical code. I'm not saying it in a negative or positive way. I'm just saying it's a different cultural approach.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a curse over you. There are demons following you. And it's not that they're trying to dupe you. They truly believe that there are demons following you. Do you know what I mean? And so I think it took me a long time to digest that information because there was just a lot of talk of, supernatural entities. There's a lot of talk of deities and of various levels of spirits, underworld creatures, ghosts. And so I really dismissed a lot of that for a long time. And I felt, a disdain for that. And so that itself, that informed my path. Correct? Because I would diverge from it and head a little bit toward sort of a reconciliation between Western occultism and just sort of a more rational based explanation for how the occult works. And then I think now I'm a little bit more interested in how to explain these ideas of deities and demons and, trying to reconcile that with something that's a little bit more digestible and palatable to our sensibilities today.
Yeah.
So it definitely informs.
I've always said that I believe that gods and goddesses are fed by energy of belief. So if you're in a culture where demons are, I mean, I'm from the South, haints or ghosts, and haints are mean ghosts. They aren't nice ghosts.
Okay.
So a haint, I really feel like we gave it energy by belief in it.
That makes sense.
If it's an energy of any kind, you feed into it. So, and that's how I feel like my work with my deities is that my energy feeds them on some level.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Even on a very simplistic sense in terms of humanity, when we are very convinced of our superpowers, when we're very convinced we're awesome, we do really awesome things. When we're insecure and feel like crap, it's very hard for us to make any sort of achievements.
Yeah.
And so just taking that and extrapolating it to what you're talking about, it does there is a resonance there. So.
Yeah. So, well, now let's talk about what's on your working table, because I'm super excited about that. What y'all don't know is that Benebell is an amazing artist.
Oh.
I've been looking at it going, wow, that's really incredible stuff you're doing. So tell us, and I believe it's the Tao?
Tao,
Tao?
It is Tao, but that's how you say it in Chinese. But I've grown up here. Everyone says Tao. I'm used to it. I don't care. I'm not gonna sit there and start speaking Chinese to people. So it's okay if you say Tao. I don't care. And that's how I say it too. But yeah, it's the Tao of Craft. It's about food, talisman, craft. I can't remember the subtitle. The Tao of Craft I came up with, and then we kept talking about it. So it's like food, talismans, and sigil crafting in the Eastern esoteric tradition. Something along those lines. We'll find out. I don't know, but there was a lot of work back and forth between me and the publisher. It's actually no longer on my working table per se. I finished it. The publishers are working on it now, and it's going to be out in September of
I
this
can't
year.
wait.
And it's basically a book on, so here's the thing with sigils. Food talismans are in effect sigils. That's why I refer to them as sigils. I think, and I don't really know a lot about Western magical traditions, but my understanding of it, and it's a very basic one, is that sigils is one facet of craft. You know, you can perform craft without sigils, and then sigils is itself sort of one own body, or one own sort of process. In the Eastern tradition, especially based on the research that I've done, looking into grimoires and old scriptures and just the history of how it's practiced in Eastern traditions, sigils are pretty much integrated into every aspect of craft. And so even though there are other elements in, you know, all of the bells and whistles that come with ceremonial magic, at some point in that process, there will be a sigil involved. And so it's a very different treatment of sigil crafting. And so that's what I wanted to talk about. And it's really more, it is kind of academic in the sense that I really talk about the tradition and how it originated from the shamanism of the first three dynasties of China, the Xia, Shang, and Zhou, and then just how it evolves over time to what it is today.
It sounds fascinating. I have a book on Western sigil, and it's basically like the Solomon, the Venus, the Mars. It's different ones, and it's just a little thin paperback that I got eons ago. So, and I've done some work with sigils, but I think you're right that it's, to me, that's, because I'm Wiccan, so that's ceremonial magic. And a ceremonial magician once said to me, he said, Wicca is to ceremonial magic what field surgery is to hospital surgery.
Interesting.
You know, he said neither is bad.
Right.
But one is has a lot more precision and a lot more steps and tools. And I said, yeah, I can see that.
So I think my study of how craft was practiced historically, it is a lot more like ceremonial magic. It's very precise. You can't even do it as so even something like this herb needs to be part of this concoction, but the herb has to have been grown in this month and harvested on this month by this. Like it gets so, I'm like, who the hell does that? All right, if you say so. But, you know, is like, I'm just reading it from a sort of more, you know, scholarly approach. I think it's fascinating that they're so specific.
Well, and it was a complete and all-encompassing way of life. You know?
Yeah.
And I guess that if you were growing stuff, you knew, like, you know, I mean, I've seen spells that say it must be done on a full moon on a Thursday at 7 p.m. And I'm like, well, but what if I need that energy now? Gotta say, and so I'm more about the intent of the thing. And yeah, I'm going to try to do the extra, but and that's again why I'm Wiccan and not a ceremonial magician. I am a Pisces, and so I am pretty flowy, is the kind way of saying it.
You know, what's fascinating to me is, so my mom would tell me a lot of the rules, like, oh, this needs to be done like this, like this, like that. But then, you know, if I asked her, because she comes from a very folk heritage, and so when I go, but why? She doesn't know. So it's funny, she didn't know the answer to why. And so when I did the research into it, it made a lot of sense into the, you know, the sort of ontological theory behind it, like the Trinity, the sacred Trinity, the lunisolar calendar, all of these things is very precise, and it made so much sense to me that it's hard for me to actually not buy into it.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense. I understand why it's so specific. It isn't just someone because I told you so. There's a very specific understanding based on their knowledge of the earth. So.
Right, and I think, and people, you know, we look at the wheel of the year in Wicca, and people are like, well, and it's a harvest wheel. It's based on planting, and when you slaughter the animals, when you bring in the food, it's a harvest thing. So if you live in Australia, the Wiccan wheel that I celebrate doesn't work. You know, you've got to change it. Imbolc right now is lambing and calving, and that's happening where I live. It's also freaking cold, so you're not starting seeds unless you're doing it inside. But people don't, I mean, and I really think you've got to learn about where stuff came from, and then, if you're like me, adjust it to where you are now. You know, so that you can work with it, and keep trying it. But you kind of teased us. You said that was a finished project. What's on your table now?
Well, I have a couple of things on the burner that are bubbling away. I don't know which one I'm going to take to completion. So, I do want to sort of focus more on tarot, but integrating tarot with other practices, probably feng shui or other, just other studies, and see how that reconciliation works out.
Hmm.
So, but right now at this exact moment, I'm not writing anything. I'm just line editing the Tao of Craft book. So.
Very cool. Well, I would like to see. I have a fascination with foo dogs.
Oh, uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
have two pair. One's in my room here, and then the others are in my front room, facing my front door.
Oh.
I have a friend who's he's second generation, I think,
Hmm.
but he had a pair of foo dogs. Now I don't know if you've ever watched any of the Witchy Women Wednesday videos that we did,
Do.
but Ember and I talk about doing a working. One of the things we did, he had bought foo dogs.
Hmm.
We took those foo dogs and blessed them and worked with them and felt energy from them. I mean, they felt alive. They were really interesting. And they were part of the protection that we did for him.
Hmm.
So, and he still talks about it because he's actually the one I talk about doing a reading for somebody whose grandfather showed up with a cleaver,
Oh, uh-huh.
and from the other side, and it was his grandfather because he hadn't been. He said burning. He hadn't been doing his venerations. He hadn't been honoring his grandfather, and his grandfather was ticked.
Hmm.
So, and I had no clue, but said I just know that there's a little man. He's Asian, and he has a big knife and a bloody apron. We have a problem, Houston. But so one of the things I would love to see out there is a deck based on Asian culture, and I know there's some out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, my favorite is actually the Yukio tarot, the Japanese one. I really like it. I have the Chinese tarot,
Yeah, yeah.
and the newer China tarot, which doesn't speak to me. But I want to see somebody do one where we have a foo dog emperor, a foo dog empress, and
Uh-huh.
go from there,
That would be.
because I'm fascinated with the culture. If you believe in past lives, I'm pretty sure I had one. I read a book by Pearl S. Buck called Imperial Woman,
Yeah.
which is about the last empress of China. Well, you probably know I don't know if you know the book or not, but she was in the Boxer Rebellion.
Hmm.
Reading the book, they were talking about the palace, and they said she turned into a room, and I knew what the room looked like.
Oh, wow.
As I was reading it, it was like it was really strange to me.
Hmm.
And I was a kid. I mean, I read Pearl S. Buck when I was probably 10, 11 years old.
Hmm.
So, but let's go back to our questions. I'm diverging.
That's cool.
What do you think the most challenging thing is about being a creative person in this field?
Um, I don't know if it's about specifically creativity. I think in this field, just for me, it's knowing what to disclose and what not to disclose. I'm constantly, I feel like I'm inauthentically balancing two identities at the same time. And it's a constant feeling of inauthenticity. But then it's funny, ironically, the Benebell and everything I'm doing here is more true to who I actually am. And yet, you know what I mean? It's kind of this ironic thing. But every single time I think about my work, my career, what I'm trying to do in terms of, professional ascension, I do realize I have to keep it separate. And I know not a lot of people really understand that, or they see that I'm not being, completely, genuine to our community. But it's like, well, I gotta live,
Yeah.
so.
And I totally get that. And I will tell the YouTube audience that I've seen people take pokes at Benebell because of her holistic tarot, and they say things like, well, she's dismissing intuitive tarot completely. And I read the book. I'm not sure we read the same book because I didn't come away with that feeling at all. I came away with a way of layering in some logical, analytical concepts and using it to build your own body of work that you already were as a tarot reader. So I'm not real sure. I think people reacted defensively.
That's okay. I think it's more about to explain where I come from, and it's exactly what I'm doing with the Tao of Craft book. So, for example, my mom is intuitive, and so she'll just say, this is the way it is, and she knows the science, and so she knows everything that I studied.
Right.
but she can't explain why because she didn't do the study. She just goes, this is what it is, it's this moon, it's that, but she couldn't explain why to you. And I just wanted to push further and ask the question why. So with tarot, it was the same way. I wanted to know, why does this mean this? Why is that? Why is this the structure? Why does fire equal this? All of these things. And then when you go backwards, it becomes analytical. Just like if you take it to a very strong analytical level, it becomes intuitive. It's really a circle. And so that's what I wanted to do, just push it to a different level of the spectrum.
Now, are you an air sign?
I am an air sign.
I thought you might be an Aquarius was my first guess. Then I thought, no, maybe she's a Gemini, but I don't.
Aquarius rising, Libra sun.
My husband's a Libra. I'm an Aquarius rising. So, yeah, I was that kid taking things apart, and then I couldn't put them back together because I'm a Pisces sun.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but that, yeah, because a lot of what you said, I'm like, yeah, she's got air going on there.
I'm air dominant for sure.
Now, what's your most rewarding thing about the work you do?
You mean in terms of tarot, after Holistic Tarot came out, the most rewarding thing was, it sounds kind of cliche and corny, but to know that I'm not alone and to really get to connect with a very welcoming and very compassionate community. That sounds so corny, but I've just been really welcomed, like very, very with open arms. And so, that has been really the best part.
Yeah, I think it's more like, where have you been? Why have we not found you before? So, and we do have a good community. I keep telling people our tarot community, in large part, is super friendly. I mean, people like what we would call big nose tarot readers, Rachel Pollack, Mary Kay Greer, James Wanless, are super friendly.
Yeah.
They're not standoffish. They're not, go away, you bother me, kid. They're like, come here, let me help. Let's talk. I'll learn from you. You learn from me. It's very cool. So now let me go back over here and look at the last question. What's the best advice for someone who wants to live a life being a creative person?
The best advice, I would say learn tarot. And here's why I say that, and it's not a sort of a biased perspective. It's because I think in a lot of ways, tarot can be like a gateway. A lot of times we are intuitive, but we don't trust our intuition. And then because we don't trust our intuition, it comes back to bite us in the butt. And I think that can be a huge hindrance to someone who's trying to be creative. Creativity and intuition are very closely linked to one another.
Yes.
And so if you want to develop one, you have to develop the other. If one is very well developed, the other is sort of naturally well developed. They do kind of go hand in hand. At least that's how I've observed people. And so that's why you see a lot of creative people in tarot, and that's why tarot people are very creative. You know what I mean? It goes together. So if you really want to develop your creativity and learn to trust your inspirations, then if you study tarot and you sort of work with that on a very anecdotal level, personal level, experiential level, then you learn what it feels like to trust your intuition. You know what it feels like when intuition hits you. And so then you can build upon that and really embrace and manifest creativity. So I would say if you're really looking to pursue a creative path, learn tarot or some other divinatory system like tarot where you're using imagery and you're using symbolism to tap into that part of yourself.
And I think that people, if you're watching this and you really want, because intuitive reading and analytical are not, they're not this diametrically opposed things. They work together. So don't dismiss your analytical self, don't dismiss your intuitive self. Let them have tea together, let them have a cup of coffee together and do this. Because a lot of us, some of my worst mistakes in life have been because I didn't trust my gut.
Exactly.
And if I could wish that to not happen to anybody else in the world. But is there anything you'd like to say here at the end, just to wrap things up, or to tell people any one last piece that you think we may have missed?
Go to Newt's in Portland, Oregon. Arwen will be there. I will be there. A ton of superstars are going to be there. It's going to be a very friendly community. And if you don't know that much about tarot, you're going to learn a lot. And if you are a tarot enthusiast, you're going to find your people. You're going to find your tribe there. So definitely go up there, join us, and also support us. If you go up to Oregon, then you're supporting the community as well. If you can't make it there, then I do believe there's a way to donate and to just sort of support from afar. If you can provide the link for people, that'd be awesome.
I will.
So
because That's perfect, Benebell. Thank you. So I forgot to, because you can go be a golden newt.
Exactly. Be a golden newt. That's the last thing I want to say.
And you can get, this is not a newt thing, but you can get cool swag that you can buy. So I'll post that, and I'll let people know that there's a interview with Jadzia that I got to do about newts.
I saw that one. She's really cool. I like her.
She's so sweet. I can't wait to meet her.
Sweet. Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much. And everybody, seek joy, y'all. Benebell, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm a fan of your channel. You know that already, so I know a lot about your channel. So.
Thank you so much. I'm putting the Tao. See, I'm going to say Tao because I say Yi
It's
Jing.
correct. That was correct. You know.
I was corrected. I say Yi Jing, not I Ching. So.
Yeah, that's actually correct too. So.
I have a friend who grew up in Hong Kong, and she's kind of fierce. So. But thank you.
I'm more like, I mean, I'm not going to sit there because I know I butcher other people's languages unintentionally, and I know my intent is always really good. So I know other people's intent is good. It's not your language. You can't pronounce it. Your tongue doesn't go that way. I'm not going to like, oh, you got to pronounce it. It's yin yang, you know. No, it's yin yang. Oh, well, whatever. Life goes on, you know. We'll say yin and yang. It's fine.
Right, and I do say yin yang because she didn't catch me on that one. She was trying to teach me. She speaks Cantonese, and she's trying to teach me a word to say grandmother. And I said it, and she said, "You've just called your grandmother an umbrella."
Really? I don't know Cantonese, so I don't know what that was.
Yeah, she said there were two. Was it Mandarin is the other language?
And I speak Mandarin, yeah.
Okay, yeah. She said that there were two different languages, and she was a Cantonese speaker. She said Mandarin was much harder.
I think Cantonese is much harder. I guess it depends on your perspective.
Whatever you grew up with, right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Go have a great day, and I'll send you the link when this is up.
All right, thank you so much, Arwen. You
Bye,
too.
honey.
All right, bye.